How are you doing? Good, all right. I like hearing your answers. Okay, that's good. This past week, I was down in Fredonia, because that is where some of my family lives. And we were down there having lunch for my grandma's birthday. And as such, I had a cousin there, and she had a 4-year-old, and we were all having lunch at the steakhouse there. The stockyard, thank you. And we were eating there, and this 4-year-old gets a hold of someone's phone and starts playing on it, as a 4-year-old might do. And he's going through, and all of a sudden, they look down, and he has FaceTimed. That is a video call where you call someone, you can see their face in front of you. A complete stranger, well, a stranger to him anyway. And so everyone's looking, trying to hang up really quickly, because this 4-year-old managed to somehow FaceTime someone. And as I watched that, I had to laugh and chuckle to myself, and realizing that as much as I laugh, one day it could happen to me. I don't know. But as I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking of all the times that when I was a kid that I picked up something valuable or something dangerous or something I wasn't supposed to have, and my mother looked at me and she said these words. Have you ever heard this? She said, "That is not a toy." Did your mother ever tell you that? You pick up something that you're not supposed to have, says, "That is not a toy." And so I was thinking about that, because there are a lot of examples with children. When I was young, my mom had these angel figurines that she left on one of the coffee tables. And they were white porcelain, and I used to use them for target practice with my Nerf guns. Until she told me I was not supposed to do that anymore. And so then I didn't, unless she wasn't there. That is not a toy. I think about every time you give a kid of a certain age, for whatever reason, a box of matches. And they have a tendency to want to play with them. You say, that is not a toy. Matches are a purpose. Or you get the kid at a certain age, and you give him his first pocket knife. When you hand it to him, you say, that is not a toy. Because we have a tendency to use things for the wrong purpose. And the funny part about this is that we as adults don't necessarily do a whole lot better at playing with things that have a really different purpose. So for instance, this week our topic is stewardship. And stewardship goes beyond just the money you make or the money you give. Stewardship is all of your possessions, skills, talents, education, everything God has blessed you with. And I would say that all of those things are not intended to be toys in our life, but tools which God gave us to advance His kingdom or bless someone else in some way. And guess what? The things God gives us can be dangerous and valuable when misused as well. So for instance, money is every bit as dangerous as a box of matches if we misuse it in our lives. It can get us in trouble. We can find ourselves in a difficult place. When God gifts us with things like children and families, those are so valuable. But if we don't take adult responsibilities for their well-being, we have ruined something extraordinarily valuable. If God gives us the gift in adolescence of, say, sexual maturity, but we misuse what it is for, then it is obvious that many people have not found God's purpose in that gift. And so what we have and what God gives us becomes a toy that we play with to make us happy, rather than a tool God has given us to make a difference. And I would say that is the purpose of our possessions and everything God has given us. When God provides us with something, we are to find a way to make it useful in the community of God's people, to make it a tool and not a toy. That is God's will for stewardship. So think of the possessions you have. Whatever it is, whether it be the car you bought, the cell phone that you have, the home that you live in. When you bought those things, did you think practically about their purpose, the tool that they were to be used by God in your life and others? Or did you buy things impractical that were simply to be toys in your life to make you happy? And so we take something supposed to be a tool given by God and make it a toy. And I would say that we have to remember that everything in our life has a purpose. There's a reason God gave it to us. Because there's something we can do to bless others with it. So for instance, whether God gave you, how about your career? Or the talents you have, or the education you have. All of those things can be misused dramatically in your life. These things can become goals in themselves to achieve, and not the means by which to serve others in this world. So, now to take a break from that, I'm thinking of something that, I don't know, I learned a while back. It's a phrase, and it's always helped me. And it's the importance of distinguishing between what they call ends and means. Have you heard that before? The end is the goal you're trying to achieve. The means are the way in which you achieve that goal. And a lot of the difficulties we have in life come when we switch around what the real goal is and what is the way that we get to that goal and make that the means, the end, the goal in and of itself. And so let me give you some examples of what I'm talking about. So for instance, if you have, if God has gifted you with a certain amount of money, if we're talking about stewardship today, that money is supposed to be in our lives a means to survive. Is you make enough money to provide for your family, to provide for yourself, to get along okay, to be able to live and go on and bless others with your life. But for some people, money, which is the means to living a decent life, money becomes the goal in and of itself, right? So your life becomes about making as much money as possible. So you reversed what the goal was. Money was just a means to a higher goal, but you made it the goal. And in your life, you lived for the purpose of making money rather than making money for the purpose of living. So you switched up the means and the ends. You get that? What was only a means became the goal in and of itself. And we do that with a million other things. The education that you were able to receive because someone invested in you. Is that the means for you to understand things in this world, to be valuable and to be able to contribute at a job so you can provide for one another? Or is your education the goal in and of itself so that you can think of yourself as smarter than everyone else? If so, you've probably switched your ends and your means. How about your career? Is your career your goal itself? Have you made your career the thing you're trying to accomplish so that you mean something to yourself or to others? Or is your career simply the means by which you provide for your family? And when you turn around what the real goal is, and you elevate that career to the top, then it gets out of proportion. And you have made a toy out of something that was only a tool from God. I've heard this in all these crazy diet programs you've heard, right? You read something somewhere on a website and it says you should eat food in order to stay alive rather than stay alive so you can eat. It's reversing the ends and the means. And it is something that I think is incredibly at the core of all the mistakes we make in life, the priorities. When we forget what the real goal is and make something subordinate to that, the goal in and of itself. That's when the things God gives you aren't used right. And what's supposed to be a tool is actually a toy. All right, let's get into Scripture now. That's our beginning thought. But let's get into Matthew chapter 25, if you have your Bibles. You can open it up to verse 14. We have what we call the parable of talents. Now in this translation, they don't call them talents, they call them bags of gold. Because a talent at that time was a unit of measurement for money. Actually, I think for weight. A weight of gold. And it was a very big amount. And so it uses that idea, these bags of gold, this weight, the talents, and it gives this parable. So I'm going to go ahead and read the whole thing. I've got the first part of it on the board, but I'm going to go ahead and go through this. Now, this is Jesus speaking the parable of the talents. So Matthew 25, verse 14. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, and to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, and how would you like to hear this? Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. Now that's the man with the 5 bags. Now it goes on a little further. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I've gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. Then the man who received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked and lazy servant. You knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and gathered where I have not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put the money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it with interest. Now, I'll stop there. But we see 3 men who had 3 different amounts of gifts of God, 3 different bags of gold. And each of them used it in a different way. The first 2 multiplied their amounts and came back with more than what had been given to them. The last one had only what he had received and nothing else. And we see God's blessing upon those who multiplied it and not on those who were unable to do so. So, this, I think, is a great parable on stewardship. Because what we have given, or what has been given to us, is something to be multiplied for God's kingdom. That's the purpose. There's something to use it for. It's not just money. Obviously, this parable of talents came down and now mean a different thing. And it includes all of that. It includes those things which God has given us in terms of abilities and knowledge and passions. All of these elements which God has given us. And so at the center of this, I would ask you a question. I would say this. People in your life have probably invested in you at some point. People have invested in you financially, yes, but also spiritually. Told you of God. Told you of the Bible. Taught you what it meant to live right. There are people who have invested in you emotionally. Friends and mentors who have fed into your life and helped you through difficult times. There are teachers who have invested in you academically, raised you up. And my question to you is, with all these investments in your life, all these things that have been given to you, have you been able to multiply them in your life? Have you been a good steward of what God has given you and people have invested in you? Have you turned the 5 bags into 5 more, the 2 into 2 more? Have you multiplied the investments in your life? This, I think, is the key question of stewardship. Have you put God's things to good use? And if you are one of those who believes that you have not had as much in life, that you've not been given a lot, then the good news is it is not the amount which truly matters. The man with 2 bags got the same reward as the man with 5 bags. And you can look over to the story in Luke 21 of the widow and see exactly God's heart on these issues. Luke chapter 21, verses 1 through 4. Jesus looked up. He saw the rich putting their gifts in the temple treasury. He also saw a poor widow put in 2 very small copper coins. Truly, I tell you, he said, this poor widow has put in more than all the others. All these people gave their gifts out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in all that she had to live on. God's heart is toward those who give what they have, and no less. So you should not be discouraged if what has been invested in you seems less than what is invested in others, for God's heart sees all of those things. But I would tell you another thing. Because there's one verse which keeps me awake at night. A verse that always speaks to me and makes me honestly a little frightened. If you look back to Luke chapter 12 and verse 48. We have the story Jesus is telling of a master who goes off on a long journey and leaves his servants to take care of his affairs and the things that he is doing. And when he gets down to the end, the master has returned to see what they've done with it. And he says in the second part of verse 48, he says, from everyone who's been given much, much will be demanded. From the one who's been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. That is a verse that keeps me awake at night, because I wonder to myself if I've truly done all that I can with what God has given me. Have I multiplied what's been invested in my life? Have I been a good steward? Now, I'm not going to bother to ask you if you are the person with the 1 bag of gold or the person with the 5 bags of gold. Because even if I asked you to that, most of us would downplay it in some sense. In the same way that when I talk to Jen, I tell her that I'm not good at folding the laundry. I don't have a talent for that. Which really means I just don't want to do it. Which she knows full well. We do the same thing. Oh, I'm a poor man. I don't have many abilities. Just a simple guy. And that really means either you don't know your talents yet or your spiritual gifts, or you're not really sure how far you want to go with them. That would be a mistake. And so I'm not going to bother asking you whether you're a 5 bags of gold or a 1 bag of gold person, because none of us will probably really tell the truth on that. But I will say this. It is not optional, biblically speaking, to multiply whatever amount has been given to you. Whether you are the widow with her mite, putting in everything you have, whether you're the one from whom a lot is expected, whether you are, whatever level you are, it's not optional to multiply what God has given us. And that is why verses like that keep me awake at night. I came from a surprisingly nice home. I had good parents, I had good siblings. The basics were provided for. I don't believe I was overly spoiled, but I was taken care of. And man, if that isn't better than most of this world, I'd be shocked. And if I have that much, how much is God going to expect from me? Have I really put to work the things that I have? If God gifted me with the ability to read and study, have I really done my best to turn that into something that can be used in His kingdom? And if God granted me with a vehicle that works most of the time, have I bothered to let other people who need it use it from time to time? Or have I bought something out of my price range because it was fun for me? Have I taken the home in which I live and been hospitable to others who need a warm place to stay at night? If I have the strange, unique, surprising ability to stand up in front of people without just totally breaking down, most of the time, have I used that for something other than my own glory? And is God going to expect that from me in the end? Have I truly made the most? I was given a lot. Have I made the most of it? And that is the question that keeps me awake at night. And whether or not I have changed my ends and my means and made a goal out of the things God gave me for a higher goal, which is to advance His kingdom and serve others in this world. That makes me afraid. But the grace of God is around us. The ability to use what we have, it is there. He gave it to us for a reason. And all we have to do is find the reason He gave us that thing. Now, I want to change approaches for a second. I want to get into something that's a little bit personal for me. And I'm going to tie it into Scripture, and I hope that you'll see it the same way I see it. But I want to take a little change of approach here for a second. One of the things that some people believe is one of those most important things, reason you live, purpose kinds of things, is this. I'm living so that I can be happy. That's the point in life, to be happy, right? And people will go to the ends of the world to find that happiness, because that is the goal. That's why we're here. God wants us to be happy. And so we pursue everything in life that we think is going to make us happy. Whether it be that career, which shouldn't be the goal, but rather the means of providing for our families. Or the money, which makes us happy and feel accomplished, but is actually the means by which to just get by and help one another and serve His church. Or we pursue our talents or our education or whatever it is that makes us us. And all in the process, we're looking, trying to find our real purpose, which is just to be happy. But in my mind, I see it a little bit differently. And it took me a while to figure it out. Now, in the Bible, we have concepts like that. We have the concept of deep down inside us joy, which God grants to those who trust in Him. We have peace that passes understanding. We have contentment despite the things in life. Paul talks about those things, particularly in the book of Philippians, which he writes while sitting in a jail cell, about the joy and the contentment and all of those things. And those are legitimate biblical issues. But in the sense of I'm living to be happy, I think we misconstrued just a touch. And in that, I want to talk a little bit about my own experience. There was a time in my life where I was so determined to accomplish whatever goal was in front of me that I told myself that I didn't need to be happy. I just needed to work. And when I did that, at some point I lost my happiness for a while. I fell into a period of depression and wondering what it was I was doing. And I got to that hard point. So I turned it around. I said, no, I have to be happy. That's going to be my goal. For the next so many months, I'm going to focus on making myself happy. And when I did that, I just got increasingly frustrated because I couldn't find it. And so I didn't know which way to go. Am I working to work, or am I working to be happy? Because neither one of them is making me happy. And then I changed my approach, and I started a different prayer. And I said to God this: I realize that when I am miserable, I am not a very good servant for you. I'm not. When I'm sitting around complaining and focusing on the things in life I don't like, I'm not really making myself available to be used by you to the fullest extent. And so God, my prayer is this: make me happy enough to be used. Make me happy enough to be able to be used by you. And that's all I ask. I don't need to love everything about my life. I don't need to have the moon and the stars and the fame and the money. I just want to be happy enough to be at peace, that I can be effective as a servant and a minister of God. Please grant me that basic level. And sincerely, I think God heard that prayer, because I finally asked the right question. Happiness itself, for me, became not the end, but the means by which I could accomplish a greater goal to help others. It was a prerequisite to being somewhat useful, and not just sitting alone in my room. It was a prerequisite to being effective. And when I corrected my ends and means, I was not here to be happy. That's not the point of this life. But I do need to be happy enough to be able to get out there in the world and serve. I think that prayer was legitimately a turning point in my life. It changed things and it put it in perspective. I corrected my ends and means on happiness itself, which is a surprising move. And it changed the world for me. And I don't know if that's going to speak to you or not, but I wanted to tell that story, because a lot of times we live for the wrong things. So, now, I told you I was going to bring in Scripture, and I do believe this is a biblical concept entirely. So, if you would pull out here in Matthew chapter 16. Matthew chapter 16, I'm going to go to verse 24. Now, as we get into this, I want to give you the context. Matthew 16 is that great turning point in which Peter answers Jesus the question as to who am I, and says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. He says, blessed are you, Peter, it's been revealed to you not by men, but by God himself, and on this rock I will build my church. In the very next paragraph, what happens? But Jesus predicts his death at the hands of the Pharisees, and Peter says, no, you will not do that. Jesus responds with his wonderful kindness, saying, get thee behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the things of God. Peter goes from hero to Satan in about 3 sentences. And then Jesus goes on to talk about what it really means to be a follower, which is not Messiah, the king, the warrior sitting on his throne, but Messiah, the guy on the cross dying for his people. And he changes the perspective, and he says this in Matthew 16. Then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is coming in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done. So you get here, Jesus sort of a reversal of ideas, this sort of oxymoron idea that if you are trying to save your life, if you are determined to find your life and to find your happiness and the things you want, and you go out searching for that, you will lose it and not even find it at all. But if you give it up in service of a greater reason, which is serving God and His kingdom, then suddenly you will find that life and that joy and that happiness and that purpose for living that you always missed. Because when your goal is actually the means, you will not get there. But if your goal is something beyond, if you throw through the strike zone and not to the plate, then you find yourself in the strike zone. When you stop looking for the remote and sit down, you end up sitting on it, right? Don't make your goal finding this life, finding happiness here. If you do that, you will miss the point. All of those things are just means by which to get to the greater purpose, just serving and honoring God. The things God gave you were not toys to play with, but tools to accomplish something so much beyond you. And you move back again to the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 6, and you hear these words, "But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all of these things will be given to you as well." It's funny, when you stop trying to be happy, you will find happiness. When you give up your right to be completely satisfied in this life, and rather become an instrument of God, then you will find that you are, in fact, satisfied in this life. Because all of the things God gave us are tools and not toys to be played with. They're not here to make you happy, but to advance God's kingdom. And please, please trust me when I say I am not against happiness. I am at a bright and joyful time in my life, and I say that deeply and sincerely from the bottom of my heart. It's kind of a prerequisite, but it's not the end. It's just a step in the process. You find your happiness and contentment, and then you find your way to serving God. That is the ultimate goal. Seeking first His kingdom and His righteousness. Because if you can look at the things God has given you, all of your possessions, all of your talents, your skills, your abilities, look for the purpose in them. And if you can't find the purpose and the way to use them to advance God's kingdom, then perhaps you don't even need them, and you can just get rid of them. Or whatever you have, you can repurpose to God's kingdom and His will and how to serve others with it. That is stewardship. Not that you have more, but that you use it for more and for a greater reason. Whatever someone has invested in you, make sure you find a way to multiply it in your life. For there will come a day when God will ask you what you did with the things He gave you. And you will want to hear in your mind, "Good and faithful servant, you have done well." And if you in that miss anything, then go back to the sermon, the parable of the talents, Matthew chapter 25, and look at the end of that again. His master replied, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things." And then what does it say? Come and share in your master's happiness. Come and share in your master's happiness. Because the things that were given were not what was supposed to make you happy. They were supposed to be used to do great things. And in finding that purpose, you will share in your master's happiness. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been good stewards. They were never toys, they were tools. So use them to something great. God in heaven, this sermon was a personal one for me, and I hope that people could hear that. I hope that your spirit is speaking. And yes, that simple idea of your mother telling you that is not a toy, being turned into, no, it's not a toy, it's a tool, it's a valuable thing, and we ought to put it to use in the right way, because that is what mature adults are supposed to do. God, all of that applies to the money we're given, which gets misused, the abilities we have, which we use for ourselves, to glorify ourselves, and all the things we make for other reasons other than the purpose you gave it to us for. And God, when we do that, when we make goals out of the things that are really just means to accomplish something else, then we think in shallow ways. And in so doing, we look for our life and never find it. But if we should look beyond that to the greater purpose, the reason you gave us those things, and put them to use in that way, with stewardship, then we will find the greater purpose. And those questions we asked before will become moot, because we find our happiness in giving up our right to be happy. For that is not the purpose of this life. But in the end, Lord, if we should look for something else, we will find it. And your joy will come to us. That is the oxymoron. That is the surprising part. That is the essence of your spirit and your kingdom. So God, I give up the right to search for all the wrong things. And rather, whatever I am given, it's yours. It's yours for a different purpose. It's not a toy. So God, show me the purpose of it, and give me the faithfulness to use it in that way. God, whether I am a person of 5 talents or 1, I'm not always sure. But God, help me to multiply in whatever is invested in me. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. This next song is the invitation song. The time for you to pray in your seats, or you can come up and we'll pray with you, or meet us after church. Just allow God to speak to you through His Spirit, far beyond what I can say myself, but what God says through His Spirit in whatever you are going through in your specific situation in life. This is the time to respond.